The Alpha King's wolf wouldn't let anyone touch him, until I spoke and he lay at my feet. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. Our story begins in the shadows of the kingdom, where rumors of the Alpha King's curse run deep. In a small village on the outskirts of the pack's territory, a young woman named Elara has lived her life in isolation. Rejected by her pack for being weak and too small to shift, Elara often wonders if she will ever find her place in this world of dominance and strength. Her hair, the color of midnight, and her golden eyes, a sharp contrast to the broken spirit within her, have always made her stand out. Yet, no one in her pack ever saw her as anything more than a mistake, a mere omega who couldn't even shift. On this fateful night, Elara finds herself once again hiding from the ridicule of her pack members. They laugh and taunt her from the distance as they celebrate the full moon. She is a ghost in their eyes. As she walks through the forest, trying to find peace, the distant howls of wolves remind her of her place in the world. Alone, unimportant, forgotten. But tonight, things will change. In the depths of the forest, Elara stumbles upon a wolf unlike any she has seen before. The creature lies motionless on the ground, its fur matted with blood, and its breath shallow. At first, she hesitates, thinking it's another wolf that has fallen to the pack's enemies. But something pulls her closer. This is no ordinary wolf. Elara, against all her instincts, approaches it. As her fingers brush against its fur, a strange energy pulses through her body, and for the first time, she feels something powerful stir inside her. The wolf's body shifts, and before her, in a flash of light and shadow, stands a man. Tall, powerful, yet visibly hurt. His eyes, once a dark amber, now gleam with an intensity that makes her heart race. Who are you? Elara stammers, taking a step back, realizing that this is no ordinary wolf. The man smiles, a twisted expression that suggests both pain and amusement. I am Damien, the Alpha King of this land. And you're the one who has saved me. His voice is deep, rough, as if it hasn't been used in years. Elara freezes. The Alpha King? The most feared ruler of all packs? She had heard stories of him, of his curse that turned him into a monster, and of how no one dared approach him. How could she have been the one to save him? Her mind races, but before she can speak, Damien takes a step forward. You're different. I feel it. You are not like the others who mocked me. You are special, he says, his eyes narrowing as he studies her. Elara is speechless. All her life, she's been rejected, humiliated, and now this powerful man, the one who controls everything, is telling her she's special? But why? She asks softly, barely able to comprehend what's happening. Because I was cursed, Damien replies, his voice darkening. And the curse was meant to keep me isolated, to make me weak. But you, Elara, you have the power to break it. At that moment, Elara realizes the gravity of the situation. She's not just in the presence of the Alpha King. She's standing before the very man who has the power to control her fate. And as he looks at her with those piercing eyes, Elara begins to understand that nothing in her life will ever be the same again. The Alpha King, the very ruler who no one dares touch, now stands before her, vulnerable and at her mercy. But little does she know, this is just the beginning of a story that will change both their lives forever. As she stands there, unsure of what to do, the moonlight casts a glow around them, and the forest falls silent. A connection, stronger than anything she's ever felt, builds between them, and Elara knows deep down that this night, this meeting, is more than fate, it is destiny. The Alpha King, Damien, takes another step forward, his eyes locked on hers. You have saved me, Elara. Now, I claim you as mine. With those words, everything shifts. Elara's world changes in an instant, from being a forgotten Omega to being chosen by the Alpha King. The path ahead may be fraught with challenges, but one thing is certain, she will never be alone again. Elara stood there, her heart racing, as the Alpha King, Damien, took another step closer to her. The words he had spoken echoed in her mind. I claim you as mine. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to process the enormity of what had just happened. No one in her pack had ever seen her as anything more than a weak, invisible Omega, and now, here she was, standing in front of the most powerful alpha of them all, the one who had been cursed to live in isolation, claiming her as his own. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her, his amber eyes burning with an intensity that made her stomach flutter. The connection between them was undeniable, but Elara still couldn't understand why him. Why now? I know you have questions, Damien said, his voice softer now, as if sensing her confusion. But all in due time. Elara swallowed, her throat dry. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You saved me, Damien replied, his eyes locking onto hers. And in doing so, you have awakened something inside me, something I thought was long gone. Elara felt her breath catch. What is it? Hope, Damien said, his voice thick with emotion. I had given up on ever being free from the curse. But now I see a way out. You are the key to breaking it. Elara blinked, trying to process his words. She had saved him, yes, but how could she possibly be the key to breaking a curse that had kept him imprisoned for so long? She was just an Omega, a girl with no special powers or abilities. But I'm just an Omega, Elara said, shaking her head. I don't have any power. I can't help you. Damien smiled, a faint, sad smile. That's where you're wrong, Elara. You have something that no one else has. You have the ability to heal, to soothe the pain of others. And that's what I need. I need you to help me heal, to break the curse that has bound me. Elara's mind raced. Heal. She had always been told that her powers were nothing special, that they were just a result of being a weak Omega. But now, Damien was telling her that those very powers could help him, could free him from the curse. She didn't know what to believe. How can I help you? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Damien took a step closer, his hand reaching out to gently lift her chin. By being with me, he said, his voice low and intense. By standing by my side and helping me through this. Together, we can break the curse. Together, we can bring peace to this land. Elara's heart raced in her chest. She didn't know what the future held, but she could feel the pull of fate, drawing her toward Damien, toward the unknown. She nodded slowly, her voice trembling. I'll help you. Damien's eyes softened, a flicker of gratitude shining through the intensity. Thank you, he said, his voice sincere. I knew you were special the moment I laid eyes on you. You are my mate, Elara, and I will protect you with everything I have. As he spoke those words, Elara felt something inside her shift, something that made her feel both terrified and alive at the same time. She didn't know what was coming next, but one thing was certain. Her life had just changed forever. And as Damien took her hand in his, she knew that together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. The moon was high above, its light casting an ethereal glow over the forest as they stood there, united in a bond neither of them fully understood. But they were bound by something stronger than fate, something that neither of them could escape. And as they turned to walk into the unknown, Elara couldn't help but wonder, was she ready for this new life? The answer, she realized, was already inside her. She had no choice but to embrace it. And so, with the Alpha King by her side, Elara stepped into a future she never could have imagined, a future that would change everything. The days following Elara's agreement to help Damien were filled with uncertainty and wonder. She had always felt like an outsider, never truly belonging. But now, standing by the Alpha King's side, she couldn't help but feel as though she was finally part of something larger than herself. Damien had made it clear that their bond was not just a matter of fate. It was necessary to break the curse that had held him captive for so long. Together, they ventured deep into the heart of the forest, far from the eyes of the pack, where Damien explained the true nature of the curse. It is a curse of darkness, Damien said, his voice heavy with the weight of years of torment. It was cast upon me by a witch who sought to strip me of my power, to turn me into a creature of shadows. No one has been able to break it. Until you. Elara looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She still didn't fully understand how she could help, but she knew she had to try. They reached a secluded clearing, surrounded by towering trees that seemed to hum with ancient energy. Damien knelt, the pain in his eyes as clear as the moon above them. "This is where it began," he said, looking around the clearing. "The witch cursed me here, in this very spot. And it is here that we must break the curse." Elara's breath caught in her throat. This was no ordinary place. She could feel the magic in the air, thick and oppressive, as though the forest itself held its breath. Damien stood slowly, his face set in determination. "You must be the one to break the curse," he said, turning to face her. "I cannot do it alone. You are the key, Elara. The magic that binds me is tied to your power." Elara shook her head, confusion clouding her mind. "I don't understand. What power do I have?" Damien stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "You have the ability to heal, Elara. That is your gift, your strength. But it is not just physical healing. You can heal the soul, the spirit. The curse has twisted my soul, and it is your touch that will free me." Elara's mind raced. She had always believed her healing powers were insignificant, something small that didn't matter. But now, standing in the presence of the Alpha King, she realized how wrong she had been. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, doubt creeping into her voice. "You can," Damien replied softly, his hand reaching out to gently touch her arm. "I believe in you." Elara felt a warmth spread through her as his words sank in. She had never felt like this before. Powerful, connected, as if her very being was in tune with something much larger than herself. She nodded, taking a deep breath. "I'll try," she said, her voice steady. As she extended her hand toward Damien, the air around them seemed to shift. The shadows in the clearing stirred, as if they were alive, reaching for her. She could feel the darkness swirling around them, but it was different now. The shadows weren't trying to consume her. They were waiting, almost expectantly. Slowly, she placed her palm against Damien's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her fingers. She closed her eyes, focusing on the warmth that had been growing inside her. It was her power, the one she had always kept hidden, the one she had never dared to fully embrace. As her fingers made contact with his skin, a jolt of energy shot through her. The curse that had bound Damien for so long fought back, but Elara's resolve was stronger than ever. She concentrated harder, willing herself to break through the darkness. The air around them shimmered, the shadows receding as light began to pulse from Elara's hand. Damien's breath caught in his throat, and for a moment, Elara thought she might be failing. But then, the shadows seemed to scream, twisting and writhing in agony as they began to dissipate. She could feel the curse unraveling, the power inside her growing stronger with every passing second. Damien's body trembled beneath her touch, but his grip on her hand remained firm. "Don't stop," he whispered, his voice raw with emotion. Elara's heart raced as the last of the shadows were banished, the air around them now filled with a sense of peace she had never known before. The curse was gone. Damien's breathing steadied, and when Elara opened her eyes, she saw the difference in him. His once pale skin had regained its color, and his eyes no longer burned with the intensity of a trapped beast. They were soft, calm, and full of gratitude. "You did it," Damien said, his voice thick with awe. "You broke the curse." Elara's hands fell from his chest, her body suddenly feeling weak from the exertion. But as she looked up at him, she saw the truth in his eyes. She had done it. She had freed him. And in doing so, she had freed herself. For the first time in her life, Elara felt whole. "I did it," she whispered, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Damien reached out, cupping her face gently in his hands. "You did more than that, Elara. You saved me, and I will never forget it." As they stood there in the moonlit clearing, the weight of everything they had just accomplished settled over them. Elara had come to this place as an Omega, a girl who had never been good enough for anyone. But now, she stood beside Damien, the Alpha King, not just as his savior, but as his equal. The bond between them was undeniable, and Elara knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. As Elara stood there, feeling the residual warmth of the energy she had just unleashed, she realized something had changed within her. The curse that had bound Damien for so long had finally been lifted, and with it, a new connection had formed between them. It was more than just the bond they had shared from the start. It was something deeper, something that spoke to their souls. Damien, no longer burdened by the darkness, stood tall before her, his presence commanding and yet full of quiet gratitude. His eyes softened as he looked at her, and for a brief moment, there was no power, no titles, no packs, just the two of them, standing together in the clearing. "You saved me," Damien said, his voice thick with emotion, a softness that was rare for someone of his stature. Elara's heart fluttered, still in disbelief at what they had just done. "I couldn't have done it without you," she whispered back, her eyes meeting his. Damien reached out, gently lifting her chin with his hand, his touch surprisingly tender. "No, Elara," he said, his voice firm but kind. "You are the one who broke the chains that bound me. You are the one who freed us both." Elara blinked, not knowing how to respond. She had always seen herself as someone unimportant, someone who would never make a difference. But now, in Damien's eyes, she saw something she had never seen before: admiration, respect, and something more she couldn't name. As they stood there, the quiet of the forest around them felt different. The oppressive weight of the curse was gone, replaced by an air of peace and possibility. But Elara knew that their journey wasn't over yet. There was still much to face. "What now?" she asked, her voice hesitant, still unsure of what the future would hold. Damien gave a small, knowing smile. "Now, we go back to the pack," he said, his voice filled with quiet resolve. "There is still much to be done. We have to rebuild, to restore what was broken." Elara nodded, but a part of her felt the weight of the responsibility that lay ahead. It wasn't just about breaking the curse anymore. It was about leading a kingdom, healing a broken pack, and finding their place in a world that had never truly accepted them. As they made their way back through the forest, the moonlight guiding their path, Elara couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger story. She had stepped into the unknown with Damien, but now, with the curse lifted and the bond between them stronger than ever, she felt as if they were finally ready to face whatever came next. "We will need allies," Damien continued, his voice low and thoughtful. "The curse may be broken, but the wounds it caused are still there. The pack may resist at first, but together, we can rebuild." Elara could feel the weight of those words as they walked side by side. The pack had once rejected her, but now, she was the mate of the Alpha King, the woman who had freed him from his curse. She wasn't sure if she was ready for the challenges that awaited, but one thing was certain: she wasn't alone anymore. With Damien by her side, she felt a newfound strength she had never known before. The journey ahead would be difficult, but she knew they would face it together, as equals. The night seemed to stretch on forever as they walked through the quiet forest, the only sound being the soft rustle of leaves beneath their feet. When they finally emerged from the trees, the lights of the pack's stronghold glimmered in the distance. Elara could feel her heart race in her chest. This was it. This was where everything would change. As they approached the gates, the guards standing watch froze, their eyes widening in disbelief as they saw Damien walking with Elara, his hand firmly clasped around hers. The Alpha King had returned, and he was no longer a prisoner of the curse. He was free, and so was she. The guards bowed deeply, their respect palpable. Elara felt a wave of emotions wash over her as she realized the full weight of the moment. She was no longer the weak Omega who had been discarded. She was now a part of something much larger, a queen, a mate, and the one who had healed the Alpha King. The gates slowly opened, and Elara and Damien stepped inside, ready to face the pack and the challenges that lay ahead. Together, they would rebuild the kingdom, and with Elara's strength, they would forge a future that was brighter than anything they had ever imagined. As Elara and Damien walked through the gates of the stronghold, the pack's territory, a wave of whispers and uncertain glances followed them. The pack had heard the rumors of the Alpha King's return, but seeing him in person, walking with the Omega who had freed him from his curse, was something they never imagined. Elara's heart raced in her chest, but she held her head high. She had been the one to save Damien, to break the curse that had kept him trapped for so long, and now, she had to prove that she was worthy of her place beside him. The eyes of the pack followed them closely, but Damien's presence was a constant reassurance. He walked beside her, his strength and authority radiating from him like an unspoken shield, yet his touch was gentle, his hand never straying far from hers. "We will face this together," Damien said, his voice low, but full of certainty. "The pack will not understand at first, but they will see what we have accomplished. They will see the bond we share." Elara nodded, taking a deep breath. The weight of what she had done still felt surreal. But the more she walked with Damien, the more she believed in the power of their connection. As they made their way toward the main hall, the air grew tense. The pack had gathered in the central courtyard, and they were waiting. Elara could feel their eyes on her, the murmurs of disbelief and curiosity swirling around her, but she kept her gaze forward, never once faltering. When they reached the courtyard, Damien paused for a moment, turning to face her. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice soft but filled with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. Elara hesitated for a moment, but then, with a deep breath, she nodded. "I am," she replied. Damien turned to face the pack, his presence commanding the attention of everyone around them. The whispers quieted, and the pack members stood in silence, waiting for their alpha to speak. "I stand before you today not as a king, but as a man freed from the curse that had bound me," Damien said, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "This woman beside me, Elara, is the one who saved me. She is not just an Omega, she is my mate, and together, we will lead this pack into a new future." The pack remained silent, their eyes shifting between Elara and Damien. Some faces were filled with disbelief, others with skepticism, but Elara stood firm, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never felt more exposed, but she also knew this was her moment to prove that she belonged here, that she had the strength to stand by Damien's side. Damien's voice cut through the silence again. "You may question her, you may doubt her, but know this, she is my equal, and she is the one who will stand beside me as Luna. Together, we will heal what has been broken." Elara felt a wave of emotions wash over her as she heard those words. She had never imagined a future like this, but here it was, unfolding before her eyes. For the first time in her life, she felt like she had a purpose, a place where she truly belonged. The pack remained quiet for a long moment, but then, slowly, one by one, they began to kneel. It was a sign of respect, a sign that they accepted Damien's words. Elara's heart swelled in her chest as she saw the transformation in their eyes. They were no longer looking at her with skepticism or doubt. They were seeing her for who she truly was. Not just the rejected Omega, but the chosen mate of their Alpha King. As the last of the pack members knelt, Damien turned to Elara, his gaze soft and filled with affection. "You did it," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You've proven that we are meant to be." Elara smiled, her heart racing as she realized just how much her life had changed. She had gone from being invisible, from being the one no one cared about, to being the one who had saved the Alpha King and helped him break free from the curse that had kept him trapped. And now, they were standing together, ready to face the future as equals. The bond between them was undeniable, stronger than anything Elara had ever known. As they walked through the pack's stronghold, the whispers faded away, replaced by an unspoken understanding. The journey ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, struggles, and doubts, but together, Elara and Damien would face them all. Their love, their bond, would guide them through the darkness, and in the end, they would rebuild the pack, making it stronger than ever before. Elara couldn't help but smile as she looked at Damien, his hand still firmly holding hers. Whatever came next, she knew they would face it together, and that was all she needed. The future was theirs to create, and she was ready to embrace it by his side. The days following the pack's acceptance of Elara were filled with both uncertainty and a sense of anticipation. Damien, now fully free from the curse, began working with Elara to rebuild what had been broken. The weight of leadership rested heavily on their shoulders, but Elara could feel a growing confidence within herself. With every passing day, the bond between her and Damien deepened. The pack, though still skeptical in places, had begun to warm to her. She had not only freed their alpha, but had also proven herself capable of standing by his side as an equal, not just as an Omega. Elara stood beside Damien one evening, watching the moon rise over the vast lands that stretched out before them. It was quiet here, away from the bustle of the pack, and Elara found comfort in the stillness, though she knew their peace would not last long. There were whispers, still, of the challenges ahead, the unrest that lingered like a shadow over their progress. "Do you ever wonder what comes next?" Elara asked softly, her voice barely above the wind. Damien turned to her, his gaze filled with a depth of emotion she had not expected. "Every day," he said, his voice low and thoughtful. But I know one thing for certain. Whatever comes, we face it. Together. Elara nodded, feeling a swell of gratitude. Together, they would face whatever obstacles were in their path. Damien's strength, once only a symbol of power, had become a beacon of hope for her, and with each passing moment, Elara felt more certain that they were meant to walk this path side by side. The peace of the night was broken by the distant howl of a wolf, and Elara felt a shiver run through her. The pack was restless, as if the change that had swept through their lives was not as complete as it seemed. I can feel it, Elara whispered, her eyes on the horizon. There's more we need to do. Damien's expression darkened, but there was no fear in his eyes, only resolve. You're right, he said. The pack is still fractured. The curse may be gone, but the damage it caused runs deep. We'll need to rebuild trust, not just among the pack, but between our people and the other territories. Elara looked at him, understanding now more than ever the weight of the responsibility they carried. Damien was no longer just the Alpha King. He was a leader who had to mend the very fabric of the world he ruled. We will do it, Elara said with quiet conviction, her hand reaching for his. Together, as the days turned into weeks, the couple began meeting with the leaders of other packs. Some were willing to ally with them, drawn by the story of Damien's curse being broken, while others remained wary. Elara found herself growing stronger, not just in her connection with Damien, but in her own right. She began to understand the complexities of pack politics, learning to use her healing abilities not just to mend wounds, but to heal rifts between the divided territories. But even as she grew more confident, she knew there were those within their own pack who still doubted her. One evening, after a particularly tense meeting with a neighboring pack, Elara overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. She's just an Omega, one of the older members of the pack muttered, unaware that Elara was within earshot. No matter what she did for the Alpha King, she'll never truly belong here. Alara's heart ached at the words, but she didn't let them show. Instead, she turned away, her mind made up. She had proven herself to Damien, and in time, she would prove herself to the pack as well. That night, as she and Damien sat together in their chambers, she couldn't shake the weight of the conversation from her mind. Damien, noticing her unease, took her hand in his. What's on your mind? He asked gently. Elara looked at him, her voice steady but filled with a quiet intensity. I overheard something today. Some of the pack still doesn't accept me. They don't see me as their Luna. Damien's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening in anger at the thought of anyone undermining her. They will, he said firmly. I'll make sure of it. Elara shook her head, her eyes softening. No, Damien. This isn't about you making them accept me. It's about me earning their respect, just as you did. Damien's expression softened, his gaze full of admiration for the strength she had found in herself. You're right, he said, his voice quiet but filled with conviction. And I'll be with you every step of the way. With that promise, Elara felt a surge of determination. She would prove herself, not just as the Alpha King's mate, but as the leader this pack needed. Over the next few months, Elara worked tirelessly, mending the relationships between the packs and proving her worth to the territory's leaders. With each success, the whispers grew quieter, and respect for her grew stronger. Damien, too, found his own strength growing with each passing day. Together, they were creating a future for their people, one where both of them would be seen as equals, standing side by side. As the final pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, Elara knew that their journey was far from over. There would be more challenges ahead, but with Damien by her side, she knew they could overcome anything. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They would face it together, as equals, and nothing could tear them apart. As the weeks passed, Elara and Damien continued their work, not just as Alpha and Luna, but as partners in every sense of the word. They had fought to gain the pack's respect, and slowly, with each decision they made, with each challenge they overcame, the pack began to recognize the strength in their bond. There was still work to be done, but the foundation had been laid. One crisp morning, as Elara stood by the window of their chambers, gazing out at the horizon, a sense of peace washed over her. The moon had risen the night before, its light more brilliant than ever. The world around them had begun to shift in ways she never thought possible. Her place in this world, once uncertain, was now clear. She had found her place by Damien's side. The pack had come to accept her, not as the weak Omega she had once been, but as a strong, capable leader in her own right. As she turned to look at Damien, who was sitting at the desk, his attention focused on the papers in front of him, Elara couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in everything they had accomplished together. "You're quiet," Damien said, his voice breaking the silence. "What's on your mind?" Elara smiled, walking over to where he sat, and taking a seat beside him. "Just thinking about how far we've come," she said softly. Damien placed the papers down and turned his full attention to her, his gaze softening. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" he said with a smile. "But we've only just begun." Elara nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "There's still so much to do. The pack needs to heal, but so do we." Damien's smile faded slightly, and he took her hand in his expression turning serious. "You're right. There's still much to heal, but we'll do it together, Elara. We've faced the worst, and we're still standing." Elara looked into his eyes, seeing the determination that mirrored her own. "Together," she repeated, squeezing his hand. "Always." The bond they shared had only grown stronger over time, and with every challenge, it became more evident that they were destined to lead together. The pack had come to see them as a team, and though there were still skeptics, the tide was slowly turning. As the days turned into months, Elara and Damien continued their journey. They traveled to other packs, building alliances, gaining respect, and ensuring that the curse that once plagued their lives would never return. They learned that leadership was not just about power, it was about trust, sacrifice, and understanding. There were moments of doubt, moments when the weight of their responsibilities threatened to break them, but in each other, they found strength. One evening, as they stood together on the balcony overlooking the kingdom they had worked so hard to rebuild, Elara felt a sense of peace she had never known. The moon hung high in the sky, casting its light over the land below. "We've done it," Elara whispered, her voice filled with wonder. Damien stood beside her, his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "No, Elara," he said softly, "we're doing it. This is only the beginning. We've faced the darkness, but there will always be more challenges ahead. But with you by my side, I know we can face anything." Elara looked up at him, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. "Together," she whispered. "Always together." And as they stood there, united under the light of the moon, Elara knew that the future was uncertain, but as long as they faced it together, nothing would be impossible. The bond they shared was unbreakable, and with that, they would continue to lead their pack, their kingdom, into a new era, one of hope, love, and strength. The days had turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, as Elara and Damien continued to lead their pack with unwavering resolve. Their bond had only grown stronger, solidified by the trials they had faced together, and the challenges that still lay ahead seemed almost insignificant in comparison to the strength they drew from each other. Despite the peace they had fought so hard to achieve, there were still whispers of unrest in the pack, doubts that lingered in the shadows, and those who could not quite accept the new order. Elara could feel it. Those who still saw her as the rejected Omega, the one who had once been cast aside, and those who resented her for standing by Damien's side. But she was no longer that fragile Omega. She had proven herself time and again. With each passing day, Elara grew more confident, more determined, and more capable of leading the pack with Damien. Together, they had set out to rebuild the kingdom and make it stronger, not just in power, but in unity. Yet, despite the progress, Elara knew that some challenges couldn't be solved with strength alone. One evening, after a particularly difficult council meeting with other pack leaders, Elara sat quietly by the fire, lost in thought. The weight of the day had settled heavily on her shoulders. She had spoken with so many leaders, trying to form alliances, repair old wounds. But there was always someone who questioned her place in this world. "They don't see me as their Luna," Elara murmured softly, her voice barely audible over the crackling of the fire. Damien, who had been sitting across the room, studying the maps that lay before him, looked up at her, his gaze soft but filled with the strength she had come to rely on. "They will, Elara," he said, his voice low but filled with conviction. "We've already come so far, and I know, in time, they'll see you for what you are, the woman who saved me, the the woman who stands by my side as my equal. You are my Luna, and they will respect that. Elara met his gaze, seeing the unwavering support in his eyes. He had never doubted her, never questioned her ability to lead beside him, and that meant more to her than words could express. But still, the weight of the pack's doubts and the uncertainty of their future lingered in her heart. I want to do more, she said quietly, her eyes focused on the flames before her. I want to show them that I am not just your mate, but a leader in my own right. I want to heal the divisions that still exist within the pack. Damien stood and walked over to her, kneeling down beside her chair, his presence comforting and steady. Elara, you've already done that, he said, placing a hand on hers. You've proven yourself time and again. And while there will always be those who question us, we'll prove them wrong. I know you can do this. Elara smiled softly, feeling the weight of her doubts lift just a little. Damien's belief in her had always been a source of strength, and now, more than ever, she realized that she had the power to change the pack, to lead them into a new era. As the fire burned brightly before them, Damien leaned closer, his voice low and intimate. But we cannot do this alone. There are others out there, other packs, who will test us, and we need to be ready. Elara nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. They had already built a strong foundation, but the future was uncertain, and the pack's position within the larger world was still fragile. Together, they would need to fight, not just for their place as leaders, but for the future of their people. The challenges ahead were daunting, but Elara felt more prepared than ever. She had stood by Damien's side through the worst of it, and now, she was ready to face whatever came next. We will be ready, she said firmly, her voice steady with newfound conviction. Together, we'll build a future where no one doubts us. Damien smiled, a small but knowing smile, and kissed her forehead gently. Always together, he said softly. The days that followed were filled with strategic planning, discussions with neighboring packs, and preparations for the coming trials. Elara had no illusions about the road ahead. There would be difficult moments, betrayals, and challenges they couldn't foresee. But she had come to understand something crucial. She was not just the Alpha King's mate. She was a leader in her own right, and together, they would lead their pack into a future that was brighter than anything they had ever imagined. As Elara stood beside Damien in the pack's courtyard, looking out at the gathered wolves, she felt the weight of their eyes on her, but it no longer felt oppressive. It felt like recognition. The pack had seen her for what she was, and they were ready to follow her, ready to follow them both, as equals, into the unknown. We will make it through this, Elara said softly, her voice carrying the strength of their bond, the certainty of their future. Damien looked at her, his eyes shining with pride and affection. Yes, we will, he replied. Together. And with that promise, Elara knew that whatever the future held, they were ready to face it, side by side, as leaders, as mates, and as equals. The months that followed were transformative, not just for Elara and Damien, but for the entire pack. Elara, once the forgotten Omega, had proven herself time and again, and now, she stood alongside Damien as an equal, a leader in her own right. Together, they continued to build their kingdom, forging alliances with other packs and healing the wounds that had been left by the curse and the division between the territories. The whispers that had once followed her faded, replaced by admiration and respect. Elara felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders, but it was a weight she no longer feared. She was no longer the girl who had been cast aside. She was the Luna of the Alpha King, and with Damien by her side, there was nothing they couldn't face. One day, as they stood at the edge of their territory, looking out at the vast lands that stretched before them, Elara couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The kingdom they had built together was thriving. The pack was stronger, united, and the darkness that had once consumed them seemed like a distant memory. Do you ever think about how far we've come? Elara asked, her voice filled with wonder. Damien, standing beside her, smiled and wrapped his arm around her waist. Every day, he said softly. But it's not just about how far we've come. It's about where we're going. Elara nodded, her gaze shifting to the horizon. We've only just begun, haven't we? She said, her voice steady with determination. Damien kissed her forehead, his touch gentle but filled with the strength she had come to rely on. Together, he whispered. Always together. And with that, Elara knew that their journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, battles to fight, and obstacles to overcome, but they would face them side by side. The bond between them was unbreakable, and with each passing day, their love only grew stronger. The pack, the kingdom, and the world outside were watching, waiting to see what the Alpha King and his Luna would do next. But Elara no longer feared the future. She had found her place in this world, and with Damien by her side, she was ready to lead, to fight, and to love with all her heart. Together, they would shape the future, a future filled with hope, strength, and love. And as the moon rose high in the sky, casting its light over the lands they had fought so hard to protect, Elara knew that they were exactly where they were meant to be.